Good evening and welcome to the South County Fire Board of Commissioners regular board meeting for March 4, 2025. I'll go ahead and call us to order and ask everybody here to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Who's your hand? Who's looking at one? Oh. Hey. All right, board members, you have the draft agenda in front of you. We don't have anything else for the draft agenda. Anything else for the draft agenda? If not, I'll move that we approve the draft agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Teoflag. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as is. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. That takes us forward then to the consent agenda. And we have two items in there. We have item 4A, which is the February 2025 payroll summary and authorization. And we also have 4B, which is the March 4, 2025 claims vouchers totaling $575,838.55. I will move the adoption of those two consent agenda items. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Wittes. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda items. Is there discussion on the motion? Is there discussion on the motion? If not, I'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving forward then in the agenda to approval of the meeting minutes. Item number 5 on the agenda and 5A, that's the February 18, 2025 regular meeting. I will move the adoption of the February 18, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Chan. It's moved and seconded to adopt the February 18, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. That moves us forward in the agenda to item number 6, which is public comment. We'll start first here in the room and then go online to our Zoom platform. First here in the room, is there any request for public comment? Any request for public comment? Not seeing any requests for public comment, let me go online to our Zoom platform and ask Ms. Blankenship to check for me and see, is there anybody on our Zoom platform requesting public comment?
I do not see anyone online.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Blankenship. Back to the room for a last opportunity for any public comment here in the room. Not seeing any, thank you. We will move forward in the agenda then to item number 7, which is the Fire Chief's report. Good evening, Chief Eastman.
Good evening, Chair Kenny, Vice Chair Lawrence, the rest of the board, liaison, staff, and the public that's online. I'd like to say thank you to Melissa first. With Susan out, Susan's going to be out for another couple of weeks, and Melissa's been helping my team, specifically with the agenda with Susan out. So I want to say thanks, and I didn't have an opportunity to talk to her earlier today. So, and I guess with that, I'll move on to, we've got a couple of things in the chief's report, and I'll turn it over to Chief Isatella.
Good evening, everyone. Unfortunately, I have some bad news and a brief on a fatality fire that we had on February 27th at about 6:30 in the evening. It was last Thursday. It was a residential fire. It was over in Station 10's area in the Lake Stickney region of Station 10. We did have a quick response, just over 6 minutes. First arriving units arrived to find the homeowner reporting that his mother was most likely still in the home. So our crews performed what we call a targeted search. So they get that report and they ask where most likely would we find the person. And so our crews went right in and started the search. The hose line went right in behind them. They were able to locate the lady in the home on the 2nd floor, but unfortunately she didn't survive. And the hose team going in behind made quick work of the fire, and the cause is still under investigation with the county fire. So that's the update on the fatality fire last week. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. And then Christy wanted to make sure you guys were aware of the open house Thursday, March 13th at Station 17. For those that attend those on a frequent basis, this is one of our most attended open houses. according to our communications team. Thursday, March 13th, 5:30 to 7. And always, it's always nice to have board members that are able to go and show up to attend. So we wanted to highlight that for next week. It is a normal open house for us. And so we look forward to seeing you there on Thursday. I just wanted to give a brief update on the ledge. Our bill did not make it up committee. I think we've told everybody about that already. I have not, just because of everything else we got going, I haven't actually done a deep dive into what bills made it out and what bills haven't in their status. I'll do that and we'll add it to the agenda to the agenda at the work session, just to give you an update of bills and which ones died in committee that we were watching and which ones are out and potentially their status. I apologize about that. What I will tell you on our specific legislation, we're working to set up a meeting with Central Pierce, who is very eager in supporting the legislation that we brought forward pertaining to the fire code official work. And so hopefully we'll meet with them here in the coming weeks and talk about strategy moving forward. As you know, we hired a lobbyist to help us with it. In my opinion, we hired the right guy. He's not going to charge us for the remainder of the session, obviously, because the bill isn't going anywhere. But we're going to bring him into the conversation and look at what and where and how strategically how to move forward, moving, the work that we need to do over the summer, and what the obstacles were, and are we able to overcome those obstacles, and then have a strategy for, doing our homework over the summer when in between sessions, and hopefully get into a position where we can make it further through the process in 2026 ledge session. So more to come on that. I guess I think it was very smart for us to get a lobbyist to help. It was eye-opening for me. We didn't have him very long, but the conversations that him and I had, I would say that if we're going to continue this process and we have a likelihood of moving it further along next year, it's something staff will work through and maybe partner with Central Pierce. And we'll bring something back about what kind of strategically where we want to go and how we want to move forward. And we'll have more information probably I'm going to say mid-April, maybe first part of May, just as a result of everything else we have going. We need a little bit of time to work through that. And like I said, our plates are full right now with Edmonds and a couple other things. So that's all I have for the chief's report. And me or any of the staff are open for any questions.
Any questions for Chief Eastman on the chief's report? Any questions for Chief Eastman? No. Great. Thank you, Chief Eastman. That moves us forward in the agenda then to our legal report. We have our attorney, Rich Davis, on Zoom with us. Good evening, Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm just going to wait to deliver my report when we get down to Section 11A of the agenda on tax increment financing.
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That moves us forward to item number 9, which is the union report. Now we believe we have Vice President Matt Armstrong on Zoom with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners, staff. I don't have a lot to report. Vice President Pickens and President Moore are both in Washington, D.C. for International Association of Firefighters participation in the legislative session over there. I know that our guys did some charity work for the firefighter stair climb down in Mill Creek, where they were on a step mill for quite a while trying to raise some money. I believe that was successful. That's all I have for my report at this time. Thank you again for allowing us to be here.
Great. Thank you for being here tonight. Okay, that moves us forward to the agenda then to item number 10, which is unfinished business, starting with 10A, which is our insurance update on the supplemental excess policy insurance. And that's with our Mr. Bothwell, our Chief Financial Officer. Good evening.
Good evening. So as part of our annual insurance renewal, you all asked staff to research a supplemental excess policy. Excuse me. So we worked with our broker and we have two proposals now. So 2 weeks ago, excuse me. 2 weeks ago, I came to you, or we came to you and told you that we had our first proposal. It was for $125,000 and it excluded management liability. So last week we got our second one. It has the same coverages, but it's for $77,000. So significantly less. The chief would like to move forward with this based on the prior authorization from the board, but wanted to provide an update tonight and also solicit any feedback. So that's what I have for you.
Any comments, questions from the board? Commissioner Teoflag?
One thing I've learned in life is to always get more than one quote. That's my takeaway from this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rowland?
That's a significant amount. Is there any difference in coverage? What's the delta?
So the coverage is basically the same. The way that they describe the coverages and the exclusions is different. But our broker has assured us that it's the same. It's primarily general liability and property that's covered. This second policy has also some coverage for directors and officers, which is excluded as part of management liability in the other one. So all the coverages are the same or better in this policy. So, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from Mr. Bothwell on the excess liability insurance second quote? And so what do we need to take any action to authorize that?
No, because you've already authorized the chief to sign the agreement at a higher dollar amount. So we just wanted to give you an update and also just take your temperature, make sure.
Well, I don't see any objections
Yeah.
to the lesser amount for the same quality of insurance. So that sounds like good work.
So we'll execute that tomorrow morning.
That sounds great. Okay, that moves us forward in the agenda then to item 10B, which is our South County Organizational Roadmap, which tonight will be administrative staffing with Human Resources Director, Mr. Cullen.
So-
Good evening.
Commissioner Kenny, if I could, I'd like Sean to just give a brief overview before Director
Sure.
Cullen takes over, if you're okay with that.
That sounds great.
Good evening, board. Thank you. Yeah, we've been liking to give a just kind of an overview before we kick each one off. Director Collin, this will be the fifth in a series of focused presentations we've been giving the board. And just as a quick reminder, when the Eastman administration came in, the leadership, we all got together and said, we're experiencing rapid change and growth in our organization, in our community, and we need a roadmap. And the concept came up that we should have a series of discussions with the board to work to collaborate between staff and the board on creating a roadmap. And so this is the fifth in a series of presentations. And we have a few more next week. Will be a deployment. And then I think we're going to have a discussion on financing, on bonds, for it to culminate in the end with potentially a recommendation. So with that, I will turn it over to Director Collin. Thank you.
Can I ask a questions?
Yes,
So
go
can
ahead.
Yeah. So this is the fifth, right? Can you
Right.
summarizing and
Yep.
then what, so that I can know,
You bet.
noting.
You bet. So
how many
the
more?
the first one was the overview, the opening by Chief Eastman.
Right.
The second one was general
Well, you don't
more.
have, you don't have to tell me now, but
Oh,
if you can send it to me, that will be,
oh,
great, so
sure.
I can organize my accordingly. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. Back to
Mr.
you.
Cullen, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chair Kenny. The last time that I came before the board to talk about the roadmap, it was about our need to revisit the staffing factor. And that was necessarily about our suppression staff. They are the biggest spend in our labor spend. And indeed, that's our biggest spend of our spend. So it's quite important. This is a little bit of a shifting of gears. We want to talk about admin staff as we create the roadmap. Because even though they sort of lag typically when we look at what needs we have to fill, there's no way to really build a successful roadmap without planning for how and when we might need to add admin resources or admin staff. And that's what we'll spend our time on tonight. We in the RFA are rightfully proud of how efficient we've been in terms of spending taxpayer dollars, particularly at this juncture where there are members of our community who are concerned about potential increases to taxes and are sort of combining that justifiable concern with an erroneous assertion that we're somehow spendthrifts, that we're wasting
Can
taxpayer
you
dollars.
get closer to your mic?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to point out that we really are remarkably efficient. Obviously, as we look at our spend per $1,000 of AV, the RFA is among the cheaper in the county, and as we compare against organizations that even come close to the service we provide, we are certainly the most affordable proposition right now when it comes to those sorts of things. I point that out because even with that, when you look at admin exclusively, we're even more lean in terms of the dollars. It makes sense because we don't need the sorts of equipment and apparatus that our colleagues on the line need in order to get their job done. And more to the point, because we don't have a requirement to fill a spot every day, we don't apply a staffing factor when we budget for admin folks. So, admin in general is definitely a different proposition, but one that we need to really pay attention to. I think typically we've treated admin staffing as a lagging indicator, which is typically appropriate. As we build a roadmap, we have to be a little bit more cautious about there are times when we may need to front load admin resources or staffing so to prepare for the kinds of things that we're contemplating. Not always, but at least at times, which is a little different than our history. For this evening, I want to sort this into a few different categories. Needs that we already are aware of, needs that could emerge due to some operational change, needs that could increase or decrease in terms of technological implementations, needs that will come just because we're growing, and kind of all the different ways in which we will assess those things over time. In terms of the things we're already aware of, we've talked about a few over time. Public records is a great example of something that has been in budget discussions over the last couple of years. The board approved a dedicated FTE for that purpose about 5.5 years ago, based upon the amount of requests at that time. Those requests have more than doubled in those years, about 111% increase since that time. And we have kind of the same resource. No different really than facilities or IT or payroll, where we've had relatively static staffing for a while and the demands on those groups or those people have increased. Facilities is a really unique and interesting example to my mind. In the last year or so, the amount of work we farmed out for HVAC here has been pretty huge and is roughly equivalent to what might be a justification for an additional FTE. If you look at just 500 hours of build spend on that HVAC vendor in 2024, it's something that we might rightfully say is about as much money as we'd spend on a body. And that's only for 500 hours, which is a fraction. And I'm not bringing that up to say it was a mistake. I haven't consulted with Chief Curtis. That may well have been the very best decision to make based upon future needs and other factors. I just bring that up because that's the kind of thing that we need to consider as we decide whether to dedicate spend on a budget and whether that spend should be for positions or purchase services.
Can I ask a question now?
Sure.
Commissioner Chan, go ahead.
Yeah, that's in accounting or finance, it's called standard cost. Is there any way you build a matrix to say, example, for public records? Like, can you manually, one person, how long, how many cases then can, in general, how many, cases that one particular person can do, and then up to what case, up to what situation, matrix that, then we know there's a need, another second person or something like that.
With certain roles, you could do that. I think it might be a little challenging with, say, public records because the nature of the requests are so different. They
Right.
range. Some of them are really simple and straightforward, and some are incredibly complicated. And just the search to find what is being requested can be so different that it would be pretty difficult. Some of the
No,
other
but
roles,
I
I
know,
think
but
we could
that's
come up
at
with.
least I got a range so that we know, yeah. Some kind of matrix, I think that's, I think, so that we can evaluate.
Board Liaison Swisher.
Let me jump in and help since this is part of my day job. The question would be to ask Amy if she fills out the metrics for the JLARC report that has to go to the state based on the number that you gave, that it's at 111% from 5 years ago. My guess is she probably is, and the JLARC report will give you a lot of that information. But yeah, you can't put a number on how many someone can handle because, like he said, the more intensive requests, those can, some of them can go on for years depending upon what has been requested. And in the meantime, you're still expected to fill in and do all the little ones that come across your desk and set those big ones aside for a little while. And so I think your JLARC report is probably the thing that will get you the information. She'll have something. She'll at least have her log of everything that she's done. And if she's doing some of the metrics for JLARC, they'll be on there and that'll help.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
In terms of needs that could emerge just due to operational change, I have a few examples. The RFA, like any successful organization, has had to evolve over time. Our core function really hasn't changed, though it's arguable it's expanded a tiny bit. But the way that we've gone about doing that work has evolved over time as we try to find the most efficient way just to meet the needs of the citizens that we serve. Some of the kind of current examples that come to mind, I think the board's heard Chief Eastman talk about hazmat numbers and the current protocol for responses within the county. If we were to add to the numbers of folks with that hazmat certification or change that protocol, it would necessarily require that we enhance our training resources to really meet that need. And that would be one of those things that would probably be sort of front-loaded as opposed to lagging. We've clearly talked about whether or not to have counsel brought in-house. And as we look at our current situation and our spend, it's pretty obvious that the resources we're getting from Richard Davis and his colleagues at CSD, as well as other ad hoc external counsel, the combination of the kind of responsiveness and the expertise that we're getting right now, we would have incredible difficulty replicating that in-house for the spend that we've got right now. So I think we're still making the right decision, but that's the kind of thing that we'll need to keep thinking about over a multi-year roadmap. Regionalization of functions is a big one, and it could really go in either direction. I'm not so sure that we'll continue in the same sort of arrangement with the FTE as we have thus far. We might, we may not. Do we further the regionalization of training offerings? We're looking into that. That could go even further potentially. We've just entered into a new agreement for the kind of funding and organization of the Snohomish County EMS. And we were, cautious in entering into that agreement, hoping that it goes incredibly well, but prudently allowing for a shorter time frame should we choose to go in a different direction. All those are the sort of kind of operational concerns that I think could change what we need to do in terms of admin staffing. With technological implementations, we've certainly, some of us here have thought a lot about a longer term need to do some big changes when it comes to our systems and how well they work together or integrate. And that could take lots of shapes. It could be really big, expensive things like an enterprise resource system where we integrate finance and HR and supply chain. We could do something smaller, but still pretty expensive, like an HR information system that does the full life cycle for an employee, including payment. We could do smaller projects that we've thought of that are simpler integrations or improvements. The board has indeed provided us some support to look into some of those things this year. All of those things would have an impact on staffing. And the irony with some of these projects is that they can both add and take away staff. Typically for the larger ones, you need to hire folks to design and implement those bigger systems. And yet you want to be careful not to just drift into adding extra FTEs that you don't need in the long run. So how do we ensure that we are identifying project staff or temporary staff or limited term staff so that we're getting what we need and then gaining the efficiencies and the economies of scale that allow us to save on labor in the long run. So that's kind of investment. So we would go up or down when it comes to this sort of thing. Growth, I think, is probably the one that's the simplest to sort of understand. From my perspective, a single large annexation would necessarily mean we'd need more folks in admin, generally because those sorts of additions, the kind of groups we might take on, we're going to get line staff, but we're not going to get the current suite of admin services that they are enjoying right now. We're going to get people, but not the associated support staff. So we'd probably need to add our own. Even with a large kind of merger or annexation like that, there are other things beyond just facilities, IT, HR that we need to think about. We have current functions we're performing now, either that we've kind of purchased or that we're doing in conjunction with other groups. SCEMS is a great example. You know, we've decided to invest in that, but if we grew much bigger, it might make sense to bring something like South County EMS in-house. If we got much bigger, we might want to build our own shop as opposed to rent that from the city of Linwood. We may have enough of a sort of a growth of our workforce to necessitate on-site medical or behavioral health support. Those are things we've thought about in the long run. They might not be 10 years away. They might be closer. If Everett in particular were to join the RFA, just that sort of broad geographical map might make us really think differently about a lot of things. Would it still make sense to have a single HQ admin? If we brought SCEMS in, if we had some on-site things like a shop, might we change our capital facilities plan? Might we do some other different things? This gets a little bit removed from admin staffing, but I think about if we had Everett, for example, would we add a battalion? Might we add some leadership ranks in operations? Those aren't really admin considerations, but they're leadership considerations. And those are the sorts of things that I think we need to begin to think about what might lead us in one direction versus another before it's upon us, just so we're kind of thinking forward about those kinds of things. Going forward, you know, we're going to continue to try to be kind of lean and efficient in admin and look for those opportunities to be more focused on improvement. Right now, there's a very dedicated effort under Chief Eastman to push decision-making further down to the most appropriate place. But I think that requires a shift in how we think. Chief Maxwell talks a lot about mental models, and this is a perfect example. This is one where if we really believe that, we need to shift our mental models. We need to support folks in making the decisions that are appropriate for their role. We need to empower them to improve and change their own work when they see that is needed. We need to support people in doing all of those things, even when they make a decision we don't agree with, which is usually where decisions like this kind of run afoul of each other. All those things will cause us to have to sort of think differently. Another thing to bear in mind is burnout. A lot of organizations talk about engagement or morale, and we certainly do. The kind of, you know, ugly side of that is burnout. It's something that any organization needs to think about. Smaller ones like our size, where you have folks who don't necessarily have a ton of backup for their function or their role, are a little bit more susceptible to burnout. And we have the advantage of people who have some tenure here, we just wouldn't want to lose them. So thinking about those things from a leadership perspective as we go. There's also some benchmarking we can do. There are lots of studies through the Society for Human Resource Management and through a group called Bloomberg Law. They look at staffing ratios based upon kind of size and function and expense and other things like that. They're usually dedicated to an HR number, not a total number of folks, but there are similar benchmarks out there for different admin disciplines. The one that I think is probably the most important and urgent is a training ratio. We've managed pretty well, kind of a 1:50 ratio of training staff for line staff. If we do any of the things we're talking about, and they primarily involve bigger numbers of folks in the line, that huger influx of people that we're bringing in, recruiting, hiring, onboarding, that'll hit training pretty quickly. And the sorts of numbers we're talking about, we would need to enhance our training resources to support those people pre and post academy and as they move through probation. So all of those things are the sorts of things that we're thinking about as we consider how and when do we add admin resources and people going forward. And with that, I'll take whatever questions the board has.
Questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Furnoff.
Hello,
Hello.
Director Cullen. Nice to see you. Thank you for the top-down point of view. One thing that came to my attention recently in talking to one of our battalion chiefs, who I admire and is easy to work with, was he made me acutely aware that he's probably leaving to retire after 36 years next year, and said a whole bunch of us are scheduled to retire as well around the same time, which, since we're talking about, these kinds of forecasting and road mapping, really, I'm interested in how we're going to deal with the attrition, the loss of institutional knowledge, especially since some of these folks are in high positions, and at least I call them high positions. They're experts in hazmat and some other, non-standard disciplines. Where does that fit in with your vision here and the discussions with senior leadership to address possibly captains, battalion chiefs, these kinds of things, all hitting the ground at the same time?
I think it's a really, really good question. There's definitely been talk about it. When we talked about the roadmap, one of the things we put up there that we haven't really touched on yet specifically is succession planning. And it's different in an organization like ours, where you've got really specified processes for how folks get promoted. We can't just kind of identify great folks to promote and make sure we provide them the support to get there when we need them. I'm probably more anxious about this than my colleagues over there in the uniform. So when I have this conversation, they're like, it always works. Everything's fine. The next guy up will do the job, which is, it's true. That's how it's always worked. And yet next spring, I think will be one of the sort of larger shifts in terms of the folks in some key roles leaving the organization at BC, DC, AC level, even chief. So you ask a very good question. It's the case that we are always in a kind of internal recruiting mode, which is really how we do succession planning. We are always engaged in promotional processes. We're having a big, long meeting just yesterday about captain's process that will take place here next week to fill out that list. So we're always creating a list of folks who are going to be ready to jump into the slot as it's vacated by somebody either promoting or retiring. And you were right. We are going to have a big number of folks. I think we'll have a good 20 or so people of the officer ranks who, chief ranks, frankly, maybe even, who are leaving. And that's okay. We are going to be prepared for it. It's just different than it is in other organizations.
I can't wait to see the size of that retirement cake, though. That'll be kind of fun.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes. I'm curious if the staff has considered job descriptions for the uniform staff that's doing work that they don't really train for when they come in to be firemen? Like where the money comes from? And if I remember right, Chief Eastman learned from a guy named, what was his name? Kushner, yeah. Now, he was a civilian, right? So this is a profession. There's people that's their profession to know how to figure this stuff out. So why do we have uniformed people doing that when they are really maybe better at operational? So is that something that could be transferred over to the non-uniform staff?
I guess I'll take a crack at it. CFO Bothwell does the majority of that work for us, but there is huge value in the fire chief understanding the finances of the organization and in fire districts and RFAs opposed to cities. There is value. I will tell you what I'm doing is you can look at Jason, Sean, and Todd, and they have a far better understanding of finances over the last 8 months than they probably have in a long, long time.
Or they even wanted to know.
Well, but I will tell you, they have, I mean, when you look at the strategic side of how we do business, and it falls aligned with, at least in my seat, and when whoever takes the chief's role, in my opinion, has to know that. I look at my 3 assistant chiefs, they need to know that. I look at Christy, my communications director, I look at Director Colin. They need to know that because we sit in a room and we talk about strategically how to take this organization to wherever it needs to go or what challenges we face. And so we don't have to be the CFO expert like CFO Bothwell is, right? He does those technical things, but we all have to understand how money works and how it works within the RFA and those pieces. So I disagree with taking it away from uniform. I think what we need to do is start taking our captains and taking and educating the organization just when they first get in here about how finances in the RFA work, how property tax works, give more when they're captains, get more with their battalion chiefs. So when they get to the DC AC chief spot, they're actually part of the team, and you know who my team is. And so we can understand the operational need. We can bring it forward to the fiscal realities that we deal with, and now we can communicate all of that to not just the folks that are civilians that don't understand the operations like the firefighters do, and the firefighters who don't understand the finance like the finance folks do. And I think it makes our organization smarter, and I think it ultimately makes us better at what we do. It allows us to continue to stay lean like we are.
When we talk finances, I'm also including how we tax too, right? So
Yep.
okay, I accept that you think it's a good idea for these guys to learn that stuff. That's good. No, that's good. I have another question then about if we get to a certain size, would we need a chief administration officer to help spread the load, non-uniform CAO? Like, let's say Everett, if they joined us, that would be a huge
So
increase.
I would say right now, no. I think I'm not a, I would do a little bit different with the structure of the organization and make a formal number 2, right? I mean, you have the fire chief and somebody, and then I would do that different. I wouldn't necessarily make them civilian. I'd keep them in the uniform in my world. I think it's a good conversation to continue to have. I don't know at what point would that organization make sense. I think that's a conversation that we continue to have. And I think it goes along the lines of making sure we have the right people in the right position, right? And you have the right skill sets in the right position. So, and realize I've been in the fire service fire and EMS for going on 41 years. So I'll just be frank, I have a bias. I think things function better when people work for chief in the fire department. Now, I also understand the challenges that go with that. I realize that you have to have the right people in the right position. You have to have the right tools in those positions to do things. And I think this conversation is a good conversation to continue to have. I think at this point in time, that's not where I would recommend the organization go. But I know that my staff continues to talk about what's the right position, right, and the right skill sets to make us efficient and make the organization move to the next place. So I say that with that caveat.
Yeah, you're good. I mean, I have no idea what we need to do. I was just asking. Sorry.
No, it's actually a good dialogue, and I think it's one that we need to continue to have. We've had it in the past. And I think if we're going to be true to ourselves, we got to talk about the things that we don't necessarily think are right today, but maybe right tomorrow. And if we're not having those conversations, I don't think we're doing our job.
Yeah, I really don't have an opinion on this. I wasn't trying to push anything. You can relax.
Yes, Chief Maxwell.
I just wanted to, if Director Collins is done, I just wanted to put a summary on everything when
We
you're
think we may-
ready.
I think we may have a couple more questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
Other questions, comments, Commissioner Shane?
I think comments, I truly believe, on the opposite, I think you guys were great. You're learning from the practical and all that. But I think it really help if you have some kind of what I call MBA experiences, finances and leadership. I just keep on remember that this university or whatever in Washington DC, right? There's a academy. What do you call that? I'll keep on forgetting the name.
The National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg.
Right, right. So I think that's especially we grow. I think as a CEO, you really need that the finance and other things that to do it. And also, I think it's easier for 5 people to learn that versus several people learn the other way. Because I always believing that uniform means a lot because you need the leadership. People in the past they kind of you got to breathe the smoke or whatever it is, kind of to understand that. So I was encouraging all your deputy assistant chief, assistant chief to really go for may not be take the whole program, maybe part of it. I'm more than happy to support that.
We appreciate that. Thanks.
Other questions, comments on that organizational roadmap piece? Mr. Cullen, I did have one thing for you to add to your list of different potential future functions. And that is if we went to perhaps got a voted on bond for a construction of a large number of fire stations, we might want to consider bringing in outside civilian talent like a construction superintendent to actually handle building 1, 2, or 3 stations at a time. Right now, we are, just my observation is we're using Chief Curtis as our construction superintendent. And while we have followed that path in the past, there are downsides to it. And particularly when you get beyond 1 station at a time, to maybe 2 or 3, we might be in the situation where we need to bring in actually maybe more than 1 person to have almost a small division, a construction division that's essentially long-term temporary. It's going to last over multiple years for construction. Could be 10 years. I don't know. But it, it won't go on forever. It wouldn't be a permanent department, but it could be long-term. So there's another area to potentially consider for civilian admin staff increase. Any other questions, comments on this? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to your next subject. You're up next on your HR, I guess the workshop and payroll changes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a pretty brief presentation on ongoing improvement work here at the RFA and admin. The board may recall a few months ago in November presenting on a different topic, I pointed out bunch of butcher paper on the wall that had sticky notes and such. It was at that time I was explaining we were in the midst of this project to map and improve the HR payroll process. We just last Thursday had our 90-day report out, and I come tonight with the results. I first, though, want to talk a little bit about lean concepts generally and about what I at least mean when I use the word lean, because it definitely has different meanings to different folks. There's really no agreed upon definition for lean. Many a graduate degree and consulting career have been made out of slight permutations and combinations of lean that suddenly become proprietary. But fundamentally, they're very similar sorts of things. It's a way of thinking, it's a methodology, it's a practice applied to looking at business processes and trying to make them more efficient. Most primarily kind of lean is associated with the Toyota production system, which it was pretty remarkable kind of results post-war in the Toyota Motor Corporation at building in quality and safety and success, quite frankly, for that car maker. We've got other examples. People are familiar with Six Sigma. That's also something out of manufacturing, but is more about reducing defects and inconsistencies in manufacturing processes. Agile is probably the least familiar of the things I've listed on this slide, and it's associated with development of software. All of these, though, really are ways of looking at and analyzing a process and the steps in a process to make sure that it's delivering the outcome that you want in a manner that is most consistent and most efficient, and iteratively getting closer and closer to that kind of state of perfection as we move along. Most lean work at base is looking at the steps in a process and determining whether they are, quote, value added or they are waste. Most people define value added as something that changes the form, fit, or function of the thing being developed, the product, or define it as something that a customer would pay for. Waste takes all kinds of forms, but is basically defined as everything that isn't value added. There is another kind of subcategory called necessary waste. So some business processes have compliance requirements that we can't escape. So we do things knowing that they don't change the form, fit, or function of the product, knowing darn well that nobody would ever pay for them, but we've got to do them because they are compliance. Sometimes we have things that we kind of require of ourselves. We create our own necessary waste. A good example would be a manager's approval in a requisition process. We know that doesn't change the thing being purchased nor the price that we'll pay for it. And nobody thinks that's intrinsically valuable, but it makes sense to do because we manage to a budget and we avoid waste, fraud, and abuse, which is quite the term these days in government. All of these things can get people a little bit wrapped around the axle because when you introduce these concepts and say, here's what waste is, and a third of your job is waste, people freak out and run screaming because they think it's an offense. Really, when you look closely at a lot of processes, there's a lot of waste, either because we've just drifted into practices or we've added things because we're worried about mistakes. All sorts of reasonable, hardworking people have things built into their processes that may not really be necessary. When I first appeared before this board, when I was starting, I said that I was hoping to bring my experience with lean to bear on improvements at the RFA. I benefit from having worked for a couple of pretty storied organizations in the area that have institutionalized lean, and I've seen it work really well. I learned pretty soon after I started that my colleagues in finance had some prior experience applying lean to kind of management principles in other cities where they'd worked. One thing that I think most people don't know and certainly don't talk about is that there are lean practices that our firefighters put in practice every day. The organization of our apparatus, where everything is, the fact that after a call, people restore that rig so it's ready for use. If there's a call 1 minute later, the way we manage our inventory, all of those things are excellent examples of lean in practice all day, every day, that create more efficiency, more reliability, more safety for our crews and the calls and the people they serve. So none of this really in a way is new. It's just a little bit different way of thinking about how we do our work. With all that as a backdrop, I figured let's take our first crack at this. And early last year, pulled together a group of folks from HR and finance on a Friday to whiteboard this HR payroll process. And just a couple of pictures. We drew all sorts of things on the whiteboard for a few hours that day. And we didn't, build Rome in a day, but we did gain a lot from that experience because we were able to see this pretty large process from soup to nuts across multiple divisions in our organization, and pretty quickly as a group recognize where we saw some waste and where we saw opportunities to make it better. Just visualizing it and seeing it and talking it through itself was pretty powerful. Roughly at the same time, CFO Bothwell was made aware of an opportunity through the Washington State Auditor's Office to get support with this very kind of work. There's a Center for Innovation. That's one aspect of the auditor's office. And for free, they provide these services to public agencies throughout the state. We contracted with them, if you will, to do two things for us. To one, come in September and do an educational offering for other folks in admin who wanted to kind of hear about lean. And then two, in early November, to do an actual workshop to look at this HR payroll process that we had sort of mapped, but not entirely mapped during that one Friday together. The Center for Innovation requires people who are requesting their services to complete a charter and to submit it as a request for the services. And it's a great practice in any case because it forces you to focus on the very thing you're trying to work on. What exactly are we trying to fix? What are our objectives? What are the boundaries of that work? What sort of people and materials will we need to do this work meaningfully? And you submit that and they either accept or not. They granted our charter and we got to work. We did establish two quick boundaries before beginning the work in earnest. And prior to this workshop at the RFA, an HR payroll request would begin with somebody typically in operations requesting a pay change. And that would go to HR, that would be worked on, that would go to finance to be finalized and become part of somebody's pay. We created boundaries for this work that said we wanted to look at every step in that process from that initial request to when it actually shows up in the paycheck. And we wanted to create improvements to that work without spending any other money on resources or technology. So those were our boundaries. The targets that you see are the ones that we put in our charter, and they were twofold. One, to reduce the steps in that process by 25%, and two, to eliminate this practice we had of cutting and pasting among and between a system and a bunch of spreadsheets. When we got into the workshop, we kind of added to our wish list with issues related to some higher Excel functionality, macros and other things that frankly go beyond my literacy when it comes to Excel. We didn't get everything done, but we did some really good work. We brought a team together that was 5 operators, 2 leaders, and 2 observers. Operators is a term of art in Lean. It refers to the people who do the actual work. So you bring the folks in the room who actually do what it is you're trying to fix because they know better what's going on, why they do what they do, what we might do differently and still achieve the outcome that we're looking for. Conventional kind of management philosophy is managers or leaders decide things, not really knowing at all how it works, and not having any idea what needs to change so as to create the outcome they've deemed. Lean is a lot more about let's bring the folks in who do the work because they will know better what our options are and why we do things. So we brought that group together for a couple of days for a few hours each. And we did pretty darn well. Our results were mixed, to be sure. So we were able to eliminate a lot of steps, but only in HR and operations. Our friends in finance had their work changed a little and in fact had a couple steps added to their work. But in the HR and ops world, 2/3 of the steps we used to take were eliminated. And if you look at the overall number of steps, almost half of them were eliminated to still generate the outcome that we really want. We removed one operator entirely. So some person who used to be involved every time we did this doesn't have to be any longer. Those kind of fewer people, fewer handoffs, fewer steps just build in more reliability and quality for a process like this. And it's one we do a lot. In the prior 12 months, we did this 430 times. So these gains are real and are the kind of work that if you can just dedicate some time to doing it, you can change things in a pretty dramatic way. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Cullen on the presentation? Any questions? Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, I do. I'm just curious why the payroll cutoff is so early for the end of the month. Basically, a lot of time we're forcing to predicting what the last 2 weeks are. I'm just curious at your payroll turnaround. I used to do a lot of payroll and stuff like that too. I'll turn around much more quicker than that a month and a half, 2 weeks before that.
Yeah, we have what I would consider a thoroughly unorthodox way of doing payroll.
Okay.
And there is a lot of work that we've been doing between HR and finance to look at changing that. And in fact, I've presented to the locals, monthly union meeting a couple times to talk about changes we're contemplating both to pay periods and pay dates, because we have a very strange way of paying right now. In some respects, we pay way too early. We don't take the time to reconcile. And in some respects, we pay quite late, just based upon when you earn something and when you're paid that something. So we are looking at that, and we are going to make changes and improvements. Frankly, we were this close to a really big change that would happen in May. And now we're running into some issues with reporting to DRS, which are causing us to go back to the drawing board a bit, which I don't think most people know, but that what you may have heard about pay changes to pay dates and pay periods has been true, and it's currently in a bit of a pause while we figure out this DRS piece. But you make a good observation. It's a great question, because what we're doing really needs to change so as to make things more clear and transparent to people out there getting paid, and less prone to rework and challenges that we currently have.
Or can we even get to the point that we can just input it into it directly rather than go fulfill the form and then, go to Melissa, blah, 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 all that
Now you're
stuff.
back to my technology slides, and I would like a few $1 million to do that.
Okay, well, you got my support.
Just so you know, Commissioner Chan, there is conversation. Melissa was on vacation when staff had that conversation, just because of emailing, and I've asked finance, we've had some conversations about a way to maybe streamline that too. I mean, it's not just everything else, but we're looking at all those aspects. And to be fair to Melissa, we haven't actually had a time to, some of the conversations we had as a result, we haven't actually reached back to Melissa, who actually does majority of that stuff on behalf of the board, to figure out how we do this in a way that makes it potentially easier. And with us not doing it, she actually is the brains behind what happens with those, specifically with the board. We want to make sure we have the conversation with Melissa to make sure if we're going to make a move that it actually improves things, and not what I perceive improves things and makes things 10 times worse for her.
Well, most likely now they increase. I don't even increasing our commissioner pay used to be by September, October. I'm totally maxing it out already, and so really doesn't. I mean, it just more efficiency.
Other board questions, comments about Mr. Cullen's second presentation here? Anything? Great. Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
Thank you.
That moves us forward in the agenda to our new business, and that's item 11, starting with 11A, which is the City of Linwood Tax Increment Financing Proposed Project. I believe that's going to be Chief Eastman and Mr. Davis.
Yeah, and so I know in your packet, you've got the analysis that the City of Linwood is proposing. and I'm not going to belabor what was in it for now. Really what I'd like to do tonight is kind of level set. I know we've talked about TIF in the past. I know Richard Davis has talked to the board about TIFs or what they are and but I know there's some changes made at last legislative session. And so what I've asked Richard to do is kind of give, I know you received a memo from him yesterday. If you haven't, it's in your department email. But I'd like Richard to just kind of give an overview of what TIF is, and maybe some of the changes since the last time he talked to us about it. And then kind of a little some specific, because he's read the proposal. Staff still has work to do. Myself and CFO Bothwell have reviewed it. There's work that staff needs to continue to do to look at, we all know who Bob Stowe is, and Bob Stowe does good work, and I'm not questioning the numbers he put in the document, but we want to verify that what the actual financial implications are potentially for the RFA over the next 25 years and have staff validate what the report says and bring that back. The other thing that I'd like to do is at the State of the City last week, I had a conversation with Director Kleisch, and he offered to come and give a presentation to the board on their TIF and their plans and what they want to do, and that directly from the city of Linwood. So I'm going to find out their availability for potentially the work session next week or the meeting on the 18th. I'm going to have Linwood come and actually present what they're wanting to do and what they're wanting to accomplish with the TIF to the board. We've got a good partnership with the city of Linwood. The city of Linwood knows some of the challenges that junior taxing entities, RFAs, have with tax incremental financing. But they want to come tell us what they're trying to do, how they want to improve the city, how they want to improve their civic center complex, and be able to answer questions that you have with the potential growth that comes from it. And then we'll probably have another final conversation shortly thereafter, potentially about comments made during the comment period. I think there's probably limited things we can do to stop it. But that's kind of what I see, a few conversations with regards to what's going on with the Linwood proposed TIF. And with that, I'll turn it over to Richard and kind of let him take over the rest of the conversation of the board and explain from what a TIF is and the rest. So with that, Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Chief. So I'll just give kind of a high-level overview of the statute that allows tax increment financing areas, and will not deal too specifically with the Linwood project analysis that you have a copy of, but I will touch on it briefly. So just to set the stage, tax increment financing has been adopted by many states throughout the United States. It's a common program. The state of Washington actually passed a tax increment financing act about 40 years ago, but it ran into trouble and was declared unconstitutional. And it didn't emerge again until 2021, when the legislature adopted a new tax increment financing statute and changed it to some extent in order to make it immune from, or to hopefully make it immune from, a constitutional attack. We have done some research on behalf of other clients who have considered a challenge to the TIF statute. And while there are some arguments, I will concede that the legislature did a pretty good job of kind of immunizing the statute and dealing with the deficiencies in the prior act. And if you look at challenges across the United States, of course, every state has their own constitution, which is different than the state of Washington. So those decisions are not necessarily applicable to this statute, but most of those challenges fail. In other words, the act in other states has been upheld most of the time. So that's kind of the background, which you find this new statute. Essentially what it is a method of allocating property tax within a defined area known as a tax increment area. it doesn't create any new taxes. It really is a diversion of taxes that are levied by junior taxing districts. And what it does is it diverts to the sponsor. In this case, the sponsor would be the city of Linwood. It diverts to the city of Linwood the tax revenue that results from increases in the assessed value in the increment area. So this increment area is designated by the city or the sponsor, and it's for purposes of undertaking development, which is normally financed by bonds, and then those bonds are paid back through the tax revenues that come from the increment area. That's how it works, kind of as a general principle. And the tax revenues that are diverted come from all the junior taxing districts that overlap that TIF. So fire districts, RFAs, library, hospital districts, and the like. And so what happens is the RFA would obtain some benefit from tax-wise from the new construction and the increase in the assessed value in the increment area. But all of the increased revenue from the increase in assessed value would go to the city. And I know I've mentioned in my memo, and you'll see it in the project analysis, that there are comments that it's essentially not harmful to a junior taxing district, that the statute kind of balances out for junior taxing districts. And I know staff is going to be doing a deep dive into this and giving you a more detailed analysis. I think there are a lot of assumptions that need to be made, but overall, it is not a neutral effect to a junior taxing district. It's a net negative because you're losing the benefit of all that increased tax revenue. Essentially, your tax base is frozen for a period of up to 25 years. So that just tells you that the harm that will occur from this. The other thing that's kind of unique about a tax increment financing area is that voters believe that their taxes are going to fund the purposes for which they've been taxed, whether it's a library district, a hospital district, a fire district, whatever. They believe those taxes are going to support that effort. And what the Tax Increment Financing Act does is it diverts a portion of those revenues, those tax revenues, to a different purpose, which is development of public improvements. So it's a little bit misleading to voters to know that their tax dollars are not going to the purposes for which they are intended. These tax increment financing areas at the core work and are based upon special purpose district taxes, right? And yet neither the RFA nor any other taxing district is going to have a say in its approval, and neither are the voters. This is a process that is completely driven by the sponsoring agency, in this case, the city of Linwood. Just to kind of give a high level of the basics of the Tax Increment Financing Act, a jurisdiction can have up to 2 of these tax increment areas. They can't be overlapping. They're limited to a maximum of 25 years, and they can't exceed $200 million of assessed value or more than 20% of the sponsor's total assessed value. In order to approve an increment area, they have to make the sponsor has to make certain findings. Essentially, they need to say that we're going to be encouraging private development by investing tax dollars and improving certain aspects of the increment area, and those private dollars would not reasonably be expected to be invested if the tax sponsor did not make that investment. And you could reasonably assume that without that investment, assessed value increases would be less. So the sponsor, in this case, the city, has to make those findings in an ordinance, which they will ultimately need to adopt in order to approve the increment area. There is, as part of the process, a project analysis that needs to be done, and that's the 75-page document that you've seen that's prepared by the city's consultant. And it needs to contain certain information, which of course it does. And a section of the report needs to deal with the impact on junior taxing districts, which this report does do. The other procedural requirements that need to be met is prior to adopting this ordinance to create the TIF, they need to submit that analysis to all the junior taxing districts that are going to be impacted. So that's why we have a copy of it. And they need to submit a copy of it to the Office of the State Treasurer for review. Now, the treasurer will make comments on the special on the project analysis, but the city is not required to make any revisions to it based on those comments. And likewise, the city is not required to take into account any comments that the RFA may have or feedback on the project analysis. It's required to be given a copy, but then the city is not required to actually take into account any comments that may be made. And then the last kind of procedural requirement is there needs to be 2 public briefings, and those need to be distinguished from hearings, because with a hearing, you'd have comment either by the junior taxing districts that are affected or the public. These briefings are not hearings, although of the ones that I have been involved in and have seen created, typically the agency will solicit comment from the taxing districts and the public. What are the impacts to the RFA? Well, again, the tax revenues that relate to the increase in assessed value will be diverted to the city. And so there's essentially a subsidization that occurs from each of the taxing districts to the sponsor of the increment area. And in most cases, subsidies from one agency to another are not allowed. And there's a statute that deals with that, but this is an exception to that rule. This is where a subsidy really is permitted, and it's done without any consent of the taxing district or taxpayers. Now, one of the things that changed in the statute and most recently that the chief wanted me to address deals with mitigation requirements. So the statute now provides that if the project analysis indicates that the increment area is going to impact at least 20% of the assessed value of a taxing district, or if it if the taxing district's annual report, in this case, the RFA's capital facilities report, demonstrates an increase in the level of service that's directly related to the increment area. In either of those cases, then the sponsor must negotiate a mitigation plan. It's not optional, it's required. And so again, it affects 20% of your AV, or if your capital facilities plan shows that your level of service will be directly impacted by the increment area, then you are entitled to negotiate a mitigation plan. Now, the statute doesn't say what, it doesn't give any guidance as to what that mitigation might consist of. It could consist of a few things. For instance, the sponsor could agree that they won't accept the full diversion of taxes, or that they'll pay back to the affected district a portion of those. And there's other options that may be available. If mitigation negotiation is required and yet an agreement cannot be reached, then the remedy is to go to arbitration. And the statute provides for a panel of 3 arbitrators to reach a decision on what the mitigation should be. And that arbitration is binding. It's not appealable to the courts if either party is unhappy with that. And that's kind of the new, those are the new provisions in the statute that were added recently. And so if you were to want to challenge or to have some mitigation discussions with a TIF sponsor, such as the city of Linwood, your capital plan would really need to address the impacts. and show that your service levels are going to be impacted by the TIF. Short of that, there are only two other challenges that can be made. One is a constitutional challenge to the TIF statute itself. And the other challenge is within 30 days, you can bring a challenge based on the city's failure to follow the procedural steps. I've outlined those at a high level. Those are really the only two challenges that the statute allows. Short of that, what will happen is the city adopts the ordinance, and a TIF has to go into effect as of June 1st. So this one is planned to go into effect on June 1st of 2025. And then this year would be the base year, which the assessed value of the TIF is set. And then you would notice the diversion of taxes beginning in the following year. And I think that's about all I wanted to cover. And so I'll pause there and then open it up for questions from the commission.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yeah, Rich. I feel like I just got punched and my lunch money stolen. What is this, a declaration of war from the city of Linwood? What, can you sum up? Is there any good reason for them to do this? I mean, except for their own benefit? I mean, who is it benefiting?
Well, certainly the sponsor benefits, and
Explain to me about the sponsor again.
Yeah, so the sponsor is the city. So it's the entity that is creating the TIF, and it is a way to fund improvements without raising your own taxes or without going to the voters to approve a tax increase.
So they can legally steal our money. This is what this is. This is a con job. Put in by the legislature, allowed this to go through when?
2021 is when this new statute was adopted.
And has any other city taken up this highway robbery?
Actually, I don't know how many, but I do know that there have been a number of cities and ports that have adopted increment areas since the statute was passed.
How'd that go with the people that were affected adversely?
I don't know the answer to that question.
This sounds so undemocratic.
Commissioner Rowland.
So it seems like the only tool at our disposal really is the capital facility plan and projections as to what the impact would be on those needs. Do we have any preliminary kind of thought?
Staff's actually still working through that piece. So, Commissioner Rowland, I think we've had the document for a week and a half, and we're still doing that work through it. I don't have those answers for you now. I guess I'll say my understanding is obviously we're not 20% of us, so that's probably not the option. To be honest, I don't think the capital facilities plan would look at that area and realize what they do provides a huge impact to provide us the opportunity to get mitigation. But part of that is I still need to go back and work with Richard once we get our work done and figure out what does that mean, and the plan in itself doesn't take into account that TIF. Does that mean we bring in, or we have to quickly bring in Brian Harris, do a quick analysis, adopt that into the facility plan? And then, there's several pieces, because the plan itself is really hard to take that one little piece and say how negatively or positively just because of our size. And so I still have work to do to answer that question thoroughly. Once staff gets done reviewing, we'll work back with Richard and figure out what those next pieces are for us. I'm not very hopeful that we have a strong case for mitigation in either case, but I think staff needs to do its due diligence, and we haven't done that yet.
Thank you. Second question would be, I guess, there's projections, this TIF contribution isn't going to cover the total cost of the public improvement. They're estimating here 24 million would be covered by TIF. Then they have to come up with the additional 60 million elsewhere, right? This is over 25 years now. Nobody had a crystal ball 25 years ago, but I'm pretty sure nobody would think that an average condo or house in our area would be selling for almost, $750,000. So I don't know what kind of forecasting model they do when they set this up, but is there a potential for them to collect more than what they had anticipated? Or is the way that the TIF is structured such that it's a dollar amount that they, once they hit, it ends? I mean, because they're picking an up to 25 years, right?
Right. Once the costs have been paid, so let's suppose the city issues bonds and has to repay and is repaying those bonds through the diversion of revenues. Once those bonds are paid, then the diversion would stop. In addition to that, a sponsor has the ability to take less than they're entitled to take, right? So, at their option. But I don't see that happening very often. I think what's going to happen is, once the debt or the costs have been paid, then the tax diversion stops, and South County Fire would then get the full value from that TIF area.
I often remember when I was growing up, the tolls in Chicago were supposed to be on the roads just until the roads were paid off, but that never really happened. So they just ended up taking more money than what they were supposed to at the start. So that's what I was wondering about this. So there's bonds associated with it that have that kind of set price. And then if it ends early, then all of a sudden, what's the impacts to us when it does end? Let's say it goes for the 25 years. All of a sudden, at 25 years, now our assessed value skyrockets because that cliff gets hit. And along the way, we're adjusting our budget. So all of a sudden, I guess all the taxpayers would get a decrease in the mill rate.
The diverted money would come back to us.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's how it would work.
I'm still wrapping my head around. Yes.
So your assessed value continues to increase,
Mhm.
and you levy based on the total assessed value. It's not as though this is taken out of your assessed value. It's included, but it's just that the revenue from that area, the increased revenue from the area will not be paid to you, will be paid to the city.
Got it.
Board Liaison Swisher.
Okay, I want to see if I understand this properly. Somebody correct me. So they're going to divert money from us to use to increase their population and their need for services that they expect us to provide. And we're just supposed to take it in the shorts and just provide the services and everything, and they get the money. Am I following?
That's essentially how it works.
And there's no recourse for us to say, hey, that's not a good plan, because how are we supposed to pay for additional firefighters, for all these additional bodies and retail that they're bringing in that they want us to cover? That there seems like there's a flaw in this plan, because I mean, there's got to be a method, because you can't expect us to provide a service to how many people was it? It was a huge number of units and then retail. And we're just, what are we, leprechauns? We're gonna go find the pot at the end of the rainbow to
So-
pay for all these people?
So I can tell you, this has been a conversation with the chief since 2022. We were a little bit late to the game. I want to say our legal counsel saw it coming and was giving briefs at chiefs conferences, and we weren't smart enough to go to the first brief. I'll say that. And part of it was just at the end of the pandemic. And so the puzzle look on everybody's face in the room is the same kind of conversations we've had at the state level with the chiefs, trying to figure out what to do and the efforts that we've done to look at statute and figure out how this gets resolved and kind of like Richard said, the reality is it's statute driven. There's very little recourse for junior taxing entities and RFAs to deal with the effects of what this does for the organization. We're going to be capped at 177 million. That's what we're going to be collecting taxes on. And then as that AV grows, I love the term tax dollars diverted. I love that term. And then at the end of whenever the TIF's done, when they pay their debt, or at the end of 25 years, then whatever we're levying on whatever the new AV is, we'll collect our full taxes. The diversion will stop and we'll get our full taxes. But yes, we're required to provide service, right? And I think, and I guess this is the first one. It probably won't be the last one. And just so everybody knows, each entity that we provide service for, so you got the 5 cities, the county can all do 2. And don't forget, the Edmonds Port can do 2 also. Now, the thing with the Edmonds Port is we don't get to collect taxes from the port or the benefit charge from the port. So there's a double whammy. So there's things that we're talking about. And I think the important thing to let the board know is what they are, what the impacts are, what it means. Because I'm sure this won't be the last time we have a conversation about a tax incremental financing within the RFA. And with the cities and things being tighter and tighter and tighter, and they need to deal with growth and infrastructure, roads and all those other pieces that they don't have the dollars to, and they don't want to go ask the taxpayers for it, and they don't want to go to debt service for it. They, if the shoe is on the other foot, we would probably be doing the same thing. So it's the reality of where we are. It's confusing. It doesn't necessarily make sense. I think we've talked about the constitutionality of it, and I think Richard said there's other districts that I think they're looking at their 3rd and 4th TIF within their jurisdiction that are willing to take the fight. But like Richard has said, the way the legislator crafted the legislation in 21, the reality is it's kind of something we're going to have to deal with that doesn't make a lot of sense, that we're not going to like. And I guess I wanted to make sure we got a good solid foundation now that we actually have one coming and it'll be implemented June 1st. And staff, we knew about it, but when you're looking in the face, staff's getting their arms around it too, and what the true implications are, and how we move forward and how to track the challenges we face, because, if it's truly this huge diversion of revenue, and we may not be able to fix it tomorrow, but if we collect the data on the ones we have, it may provide an opportunity to go get legislative change once we have more of these, and what the true impact is to the folks that need to provide the service, and what dollars are truly getting diverted. And again, we're not going to get anywhere right away, because there's a lot of agencies who've been trying to do it for the last 4 years, and we've gotten very, very minimal changes within the statute in Olympia, and I don't know where the legislation this year to unravel what gains we made last year. So I guess I'm glad I had Richard give the presentation, because it gives us all a level set on what they are and the challenges associated with them. And I guess staff will continue to keep the board appraised of what's going on with Linwood. I would expect it to go into effect June 1st.
Chief, we have more questions.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Lawrence.
Yeah, so Linwood does this now. And for next year, the AVs go up there, but we don't get any of that up. We get it in the rest of the county, our rest of our area. So the rest of the area then is now going to be subsidizing Linwood for a while. And then I guess we could all hope that the county and all the other cities do a TIF, so it's all equal. So, okay, it's all equal. But this is the most unfair, insane, anti-democratic thing I've ever heard of. I can't believe, I can believe I didn't know about it, because I don't, this is insane. Are we not going to fight this? Can't we do if not in the courts, publicly, and shame the city of Linwood and their thievery that they're going to implement? Can we? Can we? What we can do publicly, can we do to fight this? I don't, we gonna lay down and just take it?
One of the things that I didn't mention, Commissioner, is that mitigation, even when it's not required, there can always be voluntary mitigation that's provided. And so having a discussion with the city, I think, is important, and identifying the
What do you mean
impacts.
by voluntary mitigation?
What I mean by that is the city may not be legally required to mitigate the impact, but it
I mean, give
may
us some of the money back?
possibly.
Is that what you mean by mitigation?
Yeah, that's one option, of course.
What do you think the likelihood of the city of Linwood giving anything back after they've stolen it from us?
I can't speak to that. I'm just saying that is an option. That is something other than a legal option of going to court and challenging it.
Commissioner Rowland.
So I guess the overall impact of this is over the course of the 25 years, just gradually the mill rate that everybody's paying will go up compared to where it would have been had this TIF not been in place. I kind of, at least, I don't want to say I agree with, but I am a little bit understanding of the idea behind it, that if the city puts forth $60 million or how much of their own funds and we draw a benefit from it immediately, let's say the way the old things would, before TIF would work, they would go and invest all this money of the city's money into this area, build it up, and then because the values increase, now we're able to collect more revenue because we have to service it and all these other things. So it's kind of, I think I kind of understand where the legislature may have been, kind of best intentions. My concern is that we've got 5 other cities and the county and the port. And it's two TIFs, but the combined value can't be over 200 million each or total. Total. So $1 billion in assessed revenue that would get frozen. And then over 25 years, if that value, doubled in value, that would be until that 25 years was over. All of a sudden, when 25 years was over, I'm sure that they would do another TIF, so it wouldn't matter. But yeah, I think we're all wrapping our heads around it. Thank you for letting me just kind of blather there, but yeah, it's interesting.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Does the TIF apply to our fire benefit charge or our benefit charge?
No, you still get the full benefit charge from the increment area.
Oh, well, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
Can the city, I know the city can voluntarily mitigate with us, but can the city just voluntarily exempt us from it? So, the other junior taxing districts have to pay, but we don't have to pay.
That would essentially be just a 100% mitigation. But yeah, through an interlocal agreement, I believe the city could enter into an agreement to refund the money that's diverted. Keep in mind, the statute is self-effectuating, so it applies to all the special purpose districts that are that overlap the TIF area. But the city then could voluntarily, through an interlocal agreement, agree to mitigate, and it could refund some or all of the money that otherwise would go from a special purpose district. Yes.
So, and just so I'm clear, when that increase of value each year of the 25 years is exempted, the amount that we are charging to the rest of the area that is not exempted doesn't change. So if we want $100 million in a particular year, let's say it's next year, $100 million in taxes, not benefit charge, but taxes, that 100 million will come out of everywhere except that increased value in 2026 for that civic center in Linwood. In other words, we're not losing any dollars. It's just everybody else is subsidizing the civic center in South County Fire.
Your taxes will go up a maximum of 101%, right? And everybody will get taxed at a uniform rate, including the properties within the increment area. It's just that the money that would otherwise come from that increment area, the additional money above the base allocation value will go to the city.
So we actually do lose the money. It's
We
not that
do.
it's not that everybody else is subsidizing and paying for it. We're actually losing that money.
Correct.
Okay.
Just,
Okay, that helps.
just the appreciation.
Right, just the
above what it is now,
appreciation,
yeah.
yes,
So
but for 25
it
years.
becomes bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Okay, if this extremely unfair, atrocious thing happens, if they're going to, people are considering even to be so greedy and thief-like and take our stuff. Can we increase the benefit charge just within the city of Linwood?
We have to do it across the whole.
So this is incredible. This is absolutely insane in this day and age after all the palaver about democracy and, people's rights and the day and age, we went through all that woke stuff. And here the state implements something like this. This is incredible what was going through the minds of the legislature, how they could steal the money from special purpose districts.
I think it's important just, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, we were one of the last states to allow TIF.
That's correct.
TIFs are in every other state in the union. So this is not unique to Washington State.
What do you mean?
We were just one of the last states to have legislation that enabled TIF. That's correct, Richard?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, doesn't this incredibly create friction between people unnecessarily all over the country then and in our state? I mean, it's like, okay, declaration of
Yes.
war right now.
Do we know what the, so you mentioned the other junior taxing districts, Edmond School District, Snow Isle Library District.
School districts are exempt.
What? School districts exempt? Oh, you didn't mention that.
Yeah, well, sorry. School districts are exempt. So it's hospital district, library district, fire districts. I think, what are the other junior tax districts? I don't know if we have any more. Cemetery, diking districts and the such.
Because I was going to get at who might we have common cause with in the junior taxing district arena in South County to potentially commiserate with and
I think our
and
most,
talk with.
I think our most logical would be the library district number one. And then we do have two hospital districts, one being hospital district two, which is Old Stevens Hospital, which I think they're down to 6 cents or 4 cents. But you got Monroe, the city of Monroe, or what's Monroe now? Is it part of I forget who it's connected with now.
They don't cover Linwood.
Nope. They
So it's just gonna
part
be-
of Hilltop, I think, is their district goes to Hilltop. Am I correct? Commissioner Wittes, you would know that. I think we have a handful of parcels that used to be in Fire District 1 at the time, and I don't know if that's true anymore. So District 3, Hospital District 3.
Right, Commissioner Lawrence, go ahead. Commissioner Lawrence?
I forgot what I was
No.
gonna say.
Liaison Swisher, did you have a question, comment?
Well, so I'm looking at their report and so Sound Transit gets to keep their money too? They don't get they're exempted from this TIF? Because it's listed in their report as some of the districts.
I'm going to refer to Richard on that.
Hello, Richard?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't I didn't pay attention to that.
Is Sound Transit, does Sound Transit get affected with the TIF?
Yeah, I don't know. I need to look at the project analysis to see.
I remember that.
We'll do that homework and come back to the board.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yeah, what's a TIF? It's for an acronym for something like
Tax incremental financing.
tax incremental, what a euphemism.
Financing.
It's like, I gotta figure out that's what it really is gonna stand for after I get.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Wittes.
Yeah, an example of this is Linwood back when Alderwood Mall started. They went out and borrowed money to put in the roads. We build it, they'll come. It worked. The mall was there. But what it'll do to us is we get the value of that dirt. For instance, if you're comparing to it, and everything they built up after that, we don't get a dime. So it'd be like we're protecting the mall, we're protecting all those condos, everything else, all the people there, and not receiving any of the value from that. And any lid lift we do would not impact that area, or it would impact it because they get more money. So it would be losing more.
Can we not respond to them then?
I still got to respond. When that went through the legislature, if I was told correctly, it was done a lot by cities that had their own entities. So they had their own police, they had their own fire. They didn't have the special purpose districts, and that's how it got through. There wasn't a lot of people complaining because it didn't look like it would affect them. Oh, and one other thing is that they added, I think it was last year, wasn't it, Richard, to the 20%. They did add to some of the stuff to help us a little bit, the 20%, but example of that, the 20% of Linwood, if you want to call it that, they're only 17% of our assessed value anyway. So all of Linwood could be a TIF and it wouldn't even trip that trigger.
Commissioner.
Yeah, so is it just going to be a small portion of Linwood?
It's, if you look at where their civic center is, where
Yeah.
is it 57 acres? So 57 acres, and it had a value of 177 million is what I remember.
Okay.
And 57 acres, and I should have brought a picture of the map. I didn't, and
Is it the
so.
parking lot, the post office, Joanne and all?
Yeah, it's,
Where-
well, yeah, I don't know how far it goes. I don't think it goes back necessarily that far. I'd have to
It's looks like
remind
it's
my
6 blocks near the Sound Transit
Yeah.
Station.
Yeah,
6
okay.
square blocks.
So we just won't respond to that area then. Okay.
Well, we'll have to have more. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Frenhoff.
Yeah, I think when we had the presentation from the city of Linwood, they were talking about development of that area, like a commons and the high rises. So I believe this is the same property that we're talking about. So it's not necessarily the entire city. And it's a rather small piece, but a significant piece. And it may border the Sound Transit properties, and they may actually have an exemption due to federal funding and some other things that might come into play there. So I wouldn't bash the city of Linwood too badly because it is a small piece. But you know,
But the
yeah.
critical part is that's where the condos are, where the revenues.
That
are
is
and
correct.
everything else.
Use microphone.
I'm sorry. Well, but the problem is that is where the condos, where the commerce, restaurants, bar and everything, revenue, and that they probably demand a lot of services, right? So I think we need to say something, have a connect, talk to them.
Well, we will have more Commissioner Teofly.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to talk to the city of Linwood to see if they can carve us out for public safety.
Well, we will have more conversation on this subject on upcoming meetings, I'm sure, particularly if they're
Yeah.
planning on June 1.
Yeah,
That's
so
right around the corner.
So I'll have them come present. I have a meeting with the mayor next week. That'll be a topic of conversation and we'll see where it goes. I'm not gonna promise anything. And then we'll have further conversations before they implement.
Okay, with that, let's take our evening break here, about 10 minutes till about 5 or 4 to 9. So we'll be in a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, we are resuming our meeting back on the record here at it's about 2 minutes to 9. And resuming our agenda, and up next in item new business 11, item 11B, we have letters of support for the city of Mount Lake Terrace. 2 projects in the city. And is that Chief Eastman?
Yep, I'll do that
Okay,
real
Chief
quick.
Eastman.
So, if you look at the agenda, Bill, the city of Linwood is looking for partners with the state and the feds.
Mount Lake Terrace.
Or sorry.
Oh, yeah, because I say no to that.
Sorry, Malt Lake Terrace. And it's, it has to do with the Malt Lake Terrace Community Center Resilience Project. And what it is, it's about, they're looking for $4.5 million. And it's improvements to the library, which they actually use as a heating and cooling center. It's a worthy project. It benefits the residents we serve. And there's two letters in there, one for the state and the state side and one for the federal side. And what we're looking for, similar to what we did for their, and I can't remember the grant, we just did a letter of support on a month and a half ago or 4 weeks ago. And what we're looking for is the letters of support for Commissioner Kenny to sign both the Resilience Center for the federal side and the Resilience Center for the state side as support for the project moving forward. And again, it's for updates to the library, which they use as a heating cooling center. And it's about, they're looking for 4.5 million is my understanding. Anything, did I miss anything on that? Okay. So what we've been looking for is for Commissioner Kenny to be allowed to sign both those letters tonight so I can get them to the city tomorrow.
Any general questions for Commissioner Lawrence?
What does support mean?
It's just that for us, it's that we support the project. And it also has benefits to the residents that we in the RFA serve. Because the improvements to the library will allow them to continue to use it as a warm shelter or a cold shelter.
So
during
we're
COVID.
talking moral support only.
Yeah, we're not, no fiscal support from us, but the fact that it does benefit the residents we serve also. And so we're supporting the efforts and the project moving forward in the city of Mont Lake Terrace.
Any other general questions for Chief Eastman on this? Well, I'd move that we approve the two letters and authorize the chair to sign both.
I'll second that.
So I moved and seconded to do that. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion?
Well, I think we need to support Mont Terrace. I think that's the right thing to do.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And I'll make sure the city gets those tomorrow.
Great. Next up, we have item 11C, which is the Volunteer Firefighters Board of Trustees report. We had a Volunteer Firefighters Board of Trustees meeting. I don't have the date, but in the last 2 weeks. And the notable item there was the approval of Ms. Blankenship. I want to say was it a pension application or a benefit application? Pension application from a volunteer firefighter who we maintain the kind of the hierarchy of volunteer firefighters from the organizations that have become part of South County Fire. So if my recollection was Fire District 11, it was a volunteer firefighter for Fire District 11 and a pension application. And so we approved that. And that was the notable item from that meeting. Chief Eastman, am I missing anything on that? Okay. That sounds good. Any questions? Great, thank you. That moves us forward in the agenda then to item 12, which is committee updates, starting with Capital Facilities Committee, Commissioner Lawrence.
I don't think we had anything, did we?
No, but staff would like a capital facilities subcommittee meeting next week if we could. So we'll work with you to make that happen. And Melissa.
Yeah, because I want to discuss a TIF that we might implement. Thank you.
Next up is Finance and Human Resources Commission.
Yeah, we're gonna have a meeting again with that. I'm soliciting topics and things from my members. Let me know what things that you're gonna want to discuss.
Next up for committee updates is intergovernmental with Commissioner Wittes.
Good evening. Thank you. Just to update on the meetings in Edmonds, they're still ongoing. The town halls, another one's tomorrow night. And they did have one scheduled, but they're still due the April 5th on Saturday. That's going to be at 10:30 at Edmonds Woodway High School. No, they didn't have the date out for that yet.
So my question is after tomorrow, so we don't have anything the rest of this March?
No,
April
March,
5th?
there's one March 27th
March 27th, yeah.
and then April 5th and April 10th.
So we read not too many, there's not too many
4 more left.
former, okay.
And
And
tomorrow's meeting will be on Zoom.
Lastly, we have Snow 911 with Commissioner Frenhoff.
Yes, good evening. We did meet last week, or not, was it last week or the week before? Yeah, I know it blurs all together. Probably a significant takeaway from the meeting is that here, I believe at South County headquarters, we're at the next meeting going to have our regular business meeting in person, which is unusual because we've been meeting remotely. Following that meeting, and you're invited to be here, we will have sample radios of the new system for folks to try out and get to know. As you know, we're moving from the APCO P25 system into what they call the new Phase 2 TDMA, which basically means we're moving to a digital, but that expands our capabilities, our communications capability throughout the county. We can add more groups. We can add a lot of different things. So that's kind of the plus news. So there will be a series of these meetings that will be socialized throughout the region in order to get everybody sort of spun up as to when the cutover will be. And I believe the cutover is in April.
April 8th at 8 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. So if you see smoke rising from the building, you know that we have switched over.
So the question, how much, so are they all the changing everything? Or we still have all the old one in there, right?
The old, well, we've done, I think, over the last 2 years, already started beginning the migration of hardware. Is that correct?
I believe that we have all mobiles and all the portables are all the new updated Motorola radios that will work when we go. I think we all have them. I guess I want to say that the county has purchased about $25 million in radios as a result of the sales tax initiative.
Right.
And those have been distributed to the agencies. And so if you look at an agency of our size, that's a significant amount of dollars that we didn't have to expend on portables and mobile radios. I didn't want that to get lost on the board, that part of this project is the radios, both mobile and portables, are provided by the 911 center to us. They purchased them as
Right.
part of the sales tax initiative for the radio system as we move forward. And so we've been the recipients of, a
Well,
handful of
I-
millions of dollars in radios as a result of the project that did not come out of our general fund.
I have to acknowledge that our late Commissioner Schrock, and he is a one-man band to pushing the whole thing. I really appreciate it. But also, how much of this radio now?
How much are they?
Per radio?
Well, I think the portable radios, I mean, there's a MSRP, right? Which is your standard off the shelf, and then there's bulk purchasing pricing.
Right.
And so we have the bulk purchasing pricing probably on a federal schedule, and I would guess that they run somewhere around $3,000 a portable radio, and that's down from 6,000,
Yeah,
which is
that's
what
a-
the MSRP
Up-
is
up
for.
higher,
each one of
higher.
those
I
portables.
think
Higher.
the last
How
we
much?
heard,
8,000?
they're between 5 and 8. Yeah.
Double it? Okay.
Yeah, okay. I thought you were gonna congratulate, no. Okay, it's still too much money.
So before we leave this, we will also be entertaining this year, of course, the finishing of the new Snow 911 Center, and I believe that's in June. I can't remember the exact date, but there will be a ribbon cutting and invitation for dignitaries to attend. We will be transiting the meeting that normally takes place here for Snow 911 to that new facility going forward as a permanent location. And then I believe we're a dispatch system, right? You're doing some research on that. Do you care to elaborate, Chief?
So we've had a consulting group in the last 2 weeks doing needs assessment. We had a brief with them this morning. And it's in its preliminary stages to look at what our gaps are, what we currently have, and will help guide us in the continued conversation about where we need to go with technology, not just the CAD system, but records management for law, fire, EMS, jail. I mean, it's quite a large project, and we got to meet the lead of the consultant group. And they've had 2 weeks of talking to staff and the end users about what works, what doesn't, what we want, what we don't want, potential, and we're in the preliminary stages, and the chief's task group, or I forget what we call ourselves, we'll be meeting with the consultant group once a week or once a month. And there'll be more information to come, but they're in the preliminary stages.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
And Commissioner Lawrence.
Yeah, what was the date for that? That you were gonna have the,
That'll be our next Snow 911 meeting. That'll be here in this room, and it's always on the third Thursday of the month. So if you're available, we meet at 8:30. And we'll have our meeting, which goes, by the way, much faster than our board meetings, which is only like 30 minutes or so typically. So right after that, and it will be purposely short, kind of like the same agenda that we give you, Vice Chair. Nice short agenda so you can get through it. So please do come if you want to see the new radios and go from there.
yeah.
Sounds good.
I'll give you a short amount of time.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Next up, we have on our agenda is commissioner comments, item 13. Any commissioner comments? Any commissioner comments? Commissioner Wittes.
I just want to say the volunteer called me up and thanked me for the retirement that you guys put through. And also he's working with a retired Everett police officer who was a volunteer with us also on getting some of the Flamette stuff from years ago in Fire District 1. I know he was getting a hold of Ray Maddox and trying to find out where some of that stuff was.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioner comments? Any other commissioner comments? If not, our next item is going to be an executive session for review of the performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 4231-10-1G. I'm suggesting that should be, Chief, 20 minutes. Is that enough or do we need more?
Well, let's start there because I think, let's start there.
Let's start there. We'll run from 9:15 to 9:35. We'll take 4 minutes on our walk back. Start at 20 minutes, and we do not anticipate taking action at the close of executive session. And with that, we'll be in a brief recess back to executive session. Thank you.
Thanks for the
The South County Fire regular meeting is called back to order at 10 PM, and without objection, the meeting has been adjourned.